The shimmering violet flora of Gamilos pressed in on all sides, their strange, sweet scent almost cloying in Sergeant Nolan King's dust-choked lungs after the crash. Alarms still echoed in his memory, a counterpoint to the sudden ringing silence of the alien forest. He gritted his teeth against a flare of agony from his left ankle as he shifted, the diagnostic panel on his forearm flickering erratically. Seals on his battered enviro suit showed multiple minor breaches. A hiss near his neck seal barely audible. His hand, with motions learned from practice now, closed around the handle of his weapon. Its known weight was a small, solid anchor in the swirling chaos of the unknown. "Okay, King," he muttered, the sound raspy in his own ears, his gaze sweeping the dense, glowing undergrowth that swallowed the twisted wreckage of the Wanderer. "Priority 1. Figure out where the hell here is, and if anything here wants to eat me, or if Command even knows this rock exists." His heart hammered a pragmatic rhythm against his ribs. Survival first. He'd barely managed to push himself upright, leaning heavily on his rifle, when movement rippled through the luminous violet fronds to his right. Not the slithering grace of a predator he'd half expected, but something else entirely. A group of figures emerged, stepping silently from the glowing foliage, as if they were extensions of the alien landscape itself. 3, no, 5 of them. Tall, strikingly humanoid, yet utterly alien. Their skin shimmered in shades of deep jade and luminous sapphire, catching the light from the pulsating plants. Large, expressive eyes, the color of polished obsidian, fixed on him. Subtle, intricate patterns, like living constellations, pulsed with a faint bioluminescence across their smooth skin. One among them, perhaps a fraction taller, with an almost regal stillness to her posture and skin like the twilight sky, seemed to watch him with a particularly keen, observant light in her eyes. Rhea, they froze, all 5 of them, simultaneously, as if a single thought had arrested their motion. Their large eyes, already wide, stretched further, not with fear, but with an intensity that stole Nolan's breath. It was profound, disbelieving wonder. Soft, sibilant whispers, utterly unintelligible, rippled through them, a delicate sound against the backdrop of the alien forest. They stared, unblinking, at him, at this creature that had fallen from their sky. Then, driven by an almost palpable wave of overwhelming curiosity, one of the jade-skinned females tentatively reached out, a long, slender-fingered hand. It trembled slightly as it approached his chest plate. Another, emboldened, followed suit, her sapphire hand hovering near his shoulder. They began to touch his envirosuit, their fingertips tracing the unfamiliar contours of the plasteel and reinforced fabric. One found the compromised seal at his neck, her touch feather light as she brushed against the exposed sliver of his skin, then the stubble on his jaw. Another's fingers tangled gently in a loose strand of his hair near a crack in his helmet's transparent steel. Their exploration was filled with an almost reverent, childlike fascination, their eyes wide with discovery. Nolan remained outwardly still, every muscle tensed, his mind a whirlwind of bewilderment. His soldier's training screamed at him to react, to establish dominance, to create distance. But it also analyzed. No overt hostility, just this overwhelming, tactile awe. They were physically imposing, each at least a head taller than him, their movements fluid and graceful. He felt acutely vulnerable alone, his ankle throbbing, his suit integrity shot, and now the subject of this bizarre, intense scrutiny. The one he'd mentally tagged as Rhea, her sapphire skin glowing faintly, shared the group's fascination, but her gaze was different. It was more analytical, her eyes meeting Nolan's directly for a sustained moment, a flicker of deeper cognitive processing, visible within the pure wonder that radiated from her companions. Her head tilted slightly, as if cataloging every detail. The gamelon's touching became more encompassing, yet remained surprisingly gentle. Their hands explored the unfamiliar textures of his armor, the clasps of his tactical webbing, the solid bulk of his masculine frame beneath the suit. Their expressions were a constant, captivating mix of awe, confusion, and intense concentration, as if trying to decipher a complex, beautiful puzzle. Soft coos and murmurs accompanied their exploration. Fighting through the fog of shock, Nolan slowly raised his right hand, palm open, fingers spread in what he hoped was a universal gesture of non-aggression. The effect was instantaneous. The gamelons paused their tactile exploration, their large eyes fixating on his gloved hand. A few tilted their heads, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing softly. Then, one of the jade-skinned females, hesitantly, almost shyly, mirrored the gesture with her own larger, more slender hand, her long fingers uncurling slowly. One of them, her attention drawn lower, discovered the tear in his suit near his throbbing ankle. Her fingers, delicate but firm, brushed against the exposed human skin beneath the torn fabric. She emitted a soft, breathy vocalization, a sound of pure, unadulterated fascination, her eyes widening even further. The sound drew the immediate, intense interest of the others. They crowded closer, their attention zeroing in on this new marvel, the sight, the texture of him. Their focus shifted acutely, their touches becoming more inquisitive on any exposed human elements or areas where Nolan's male physique was distinct through the suit. The breadth of his shoulders, the line of his jaw visible through the cracked visor, the curve of his bicep beneath the plasteel. Their soft murmurs intensified, imbued with questioning tones and shared glances of profound puzzlement and awe. It was as if they'd never conceived of such a form. Nolan recognized the utter futility, the potential danger, of resisting their numbers and their sheer, awe-inspired curiosity. His strategic priority, honed in countless hostile zones, shifted. Immediate escape was impossible. De-escalation, endurance, and observation were paramount now. He had to find an opportunity to understand their intent, to perhaps establish some rudimentary communication, before their fascination overwhelmed him completely. Suddenly, Rhea made a distinct, soft vocalization. It was a melodic sound, a series of gentle, resonant notes that cut through the other murmurs. Instantly, the other gamelons stilled their intense tactile examination of Nolan. They turned their heads towards Rhea, their large eyes blinking slowly, awaiting her lead. Her influence was undeniable. Following Rhea's subtle nod, a shared, unspoken understanding seemed to pass through the group. The gamelon females gently, almost reverently, began to nudge Nolan. Their touches transitioned from pure discovery to a clear, insistent encouragement for him to move with them deeper into the glowing alien forest. He was their captive, not of malice, but of a benign, utterly overwhelming curiosity. The shimmering violet flora of Gamelos pressed in on all sides, their strange, sweet scent almost cloying in Sergeant Nolan King's dust-choked lungs after the crash. The gamelon females, their jade skin glowing softly in the dappled light, began to move, urging him forward with gentle touches and soft, questioning sounds. The forest floor was a carpet of pulsating moss, the air thick with humidity. The gamelons moved with an easy grace that Nolan envied. His sprained ankle throbbed with each step, The bioluminescent flora shifted and pulsed with light around them, creating an ethereal, disorienting effect. He felt like he was walking through a living kaleidoscope, each step further isolating him. The gamelons communicated with each other through soft, melodic vocalizations, a language Nolan couldn't understand. The sounds were like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Yet he sensed a shared understanding, a coordination in their movements as they guided him. It was as if they were all connected by an invisible thread. Despite his captivity, Nolan's training kicked in. He scanned his surroundings, noting the broad, flat leaves of the trees, the strange, clicking sounds of unseen creatures. The animal tracks pressed into the glowing moss. Nothing immediately hostile, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. He needed a landmark, something to orient himself. But the alien flora offered no familiar reference points. The terrain became increasingly uneven. Twisted roots snaked across the path, and the ground sloped upward. Nolan's ankle protested with a sharp stab of pain. The gamelons, noticing his discomfort, subtly adjusted their pace. One of them, the tallest, with swirling patterns of bioluminescence on her shoulders, offered him a sturdy branch as a makeshift crutch. Another gently supported his arm, easing his weight. Their concern felt genuine, a surprising contrast to their earlier intense curiosity. The group emerged into a clearing. Before them stood a structure unlike anything Nolan had ever seen. It was built from woven, living plants and bioluminescent crystals, seamlessly integrated into the surrounding environment. The walls were a tapestry of interwoven vines, pulsing with soft light. Crystalline structures, like oversized geodes, jutted out from the walls, casting intricate patterns on the ground. It was a dwelling, a communal space, a testament to gamelon bioengineering prowess. The gamelons guided him inside. The interior was softly lit by the glowing crystals and plant fibers. Intricate, woven patterns adorned the walls, creating a sense of organic comfort that was a stark contrast to the cold, sterile metal of his crashed ship. The air hummed with a low, resonant frequency, almost imperceptible but felt deep in his bones. One of the gamelons, Rhea, he thought, carefully reached for the release on his helmet. He instinctively tensed, but her touch was gentle, hesitant. He allowed her to unseal it, the helmet hissing as it detached. A rush of air filled his lungs, slightly warmer and more humid than Earth's atmosphere. The gamelons watched his reaction closely, studying his breathing, his facial expressions. Nolan was immediately struck by a complex, unfamiliar scent. It was a mixture of sweet floral notes, like jasmine and honeysuckle, with earthy undertones of damp soil and decaying leaves. Underlying it all was a subtle metallic tang, something akin to ozone, that he couldn't quite identify. The combination was both alien and strangely appealing. The gamelons resumed their tactile examination, now with greater freedom. They gently touched his face, his hair, his neck, their slender fingers tracing the contours of his skin. The touch was light, almost hesitant, yet their focused intensity made him feel like a specimen under a microscope. It was both clinical and strangely intimate. Rhea's touch was distinctly different. Her fingers lingered longer on his jawline, tracing the stubble of his beard. Her gaze was more analytical, as if she was trying to understand the underlying structure and function of his body rather than just experiencing its surface texture. He felt a flicker of something unreadable in her amber eyes. One of the gamelons gasped softly, pointing to the minor breaches in his enviro suit. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to concern as they examined the exposed skin on his arm and the underlying abrasions. They murmured to each other in their melodic language, their voices filled with a palpable empathy. Rhea retrieved a small, intricately carved bowl from a nearby alcove. Inside was a shimmering, luminescent paste made from crushed plants. She carefully applied the substance to Nolan's wounds. The balm had an immediate cooling effect, soothing the burning pain. He watched in amazement as the injuries began to visibly heal, the skin knitting itself back together. Their knowledge of bioengineered medicine was clearly advanced. Nolan attempted to communicate. He pointed to his mouth, miming drinking, then gestured to his throbbing ankle. The gamelons, led by Rhea, seemed to understand intuitively. They responded with nods and gentle guidance, leading him towards a clear pool of water bubbling from a crystalline formation. One of the gamelons offered him a pulpy fruit that glowed faintly with bioluminescence. Its skin was smooth and cool to the touch. He hesitated, then took a bite. The taste and texture were completely alien. A mix of sweet, savory, and slightly metallic notes exploded on his tongue. It was unlike anything he had ever tasted, challenging his expectations of what food could be. The gamelons guided Nolan to a comfortable seating area made from woven plant fibers. It was soft and yielding, providing welcome relief for his aching muscles. They arranged themselves around him in a semicircle, their large eyes fixed on him with unwavering curiosity. He felt like both a guest and a specimen under observation, caught between their genuine concern and their scientific fascination. Rhea stepped forward, holding out a small, intricately carved object made from a polished crystal. It was shaped like a stylized flower, its petals radiating a soft internal light. She held it out to him with an open palm and a soft vocalization that seemed to convey an invitation for trust and understanding. Nolan cautiously accepted the crystal. It felt warm to the touch, a faint vibration humming against his skin. Rhea's eyes met his with a directness that transcended the language barrier. He saw intelligence, curiosity, and a hint of something more, a nascent connection that sparked a flicker of hope within him. Rhea picked up a smooth, flat piece of bark and a sharpened crystal. With deliberate strokes, she began to draw a crude image of Nolan, exaggerating his broader shoulders and shorter stature compared to the gamelon. Then she drew a simplified image of herself, her large eyes and flowing hair clearly represented. She looked expectantly at Nolan, tilting her head, clearly attempting to establish a basic form of visual communication and elicit information about his origins. Nolan, understanding her intent, took the crystal from her. He hesitated for a moment, then drew a rough approximation of the Earth symbol, a circle with a cross bisecting it. He pointed to the symbol, then to himself, hoping to convey his home planet and species. The gamelons exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of confusion and growing understanding. Rhea looked back at Nolan, her eyes filled with a question he couldn't yet answer. What now? The immediate future was uncertain, dependent on further communication, on building a bridge across the vast gulf of their differences. Nolan's throat felt like sandpaper. He swallowed, the gritty sensation doing little to ease the discomfort. Dehydration, on top of everything else. He needed water. Rhea seemed to sense his distress. Her teal eyes, bright even in the filtered light of the dwelling, focused on him with an intensity that was both unnerving and strangely comforting. She spoke a few quick words to the other gamelons, a series of melodic clicks and whistles that Nolan couldn't begin to decipher. Immediately, they responded, moving with a practiced efficiency that suggested a well-oiled machine. One of the gamelons, the tallest of the group, returned carrying a large, intricately woven bowl. Inside, a shimmering liquid pulsed with a soft internal light. The light illuminated the Gamilon's features, making her skin glow with an ethereal beauty. She offered the bowl to Nolan with both hands, a gesture of clear respect. He hesitated. The liquid looked alien, but his body screamed for hydration. He took the bowl, the woven material surprisingly soft and warm to the touch. The liquid emitted a faint, sweet scent, unlike anything he'd encountered before. Rhea gestured for him to drink. He took a tentative sip. The taste was clean and refreshing, with a subtle floral note that lingered on his tongue. It wasn't just water, it was something more. He drank deeply, the liquid soothing his parched throat and easing the pounding in his head. The Gamelons watched him, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. When he finished, he handed the bowl back to Rhea, offering a nod of thanks. "Thanks," he rasped, then realized they wouldn't understand the word. He pointed to himself, then made a drinking motion, then pointed to Rhea, and smiled. Rhea mirrored his smile, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. She seemed to understand. Another Gamelon guided him towards a raised platform in the center of the dwelling. It was covered with a thick layer of woven plant fibers, creating a soft, inviting bed. He was exhausted, every muscle in his body aching from the crash. He didn't need to be told twice. He lay down on the alien bed, the fibers conforming to his body with surprising comfort. The air was warm and humid, filled with the scent of exotic plants. He closed his eyes, letting the exhaustion wash over him. He drifted off to sleep almost immediately, but even in his sleep-deprived state, he was aware of the Gamelons watching him. He could feel their eyes on him, studying his every breath, every twitch. It was unsettling, but he was too tired to care. Rhea remained close, sitting cross-legged near the edge of the platform. She watched Nolan as he slept, her expression thoughtful. She seemed to be monitoring his well-being, not just through observation, but through something more. A subtle empathic sense, perhaps. She tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something he couldn't hear. A frown creased her brow when he flinched in his sleep. A silent concern etched on her face. When Nolan finally awoke, he felt surprisingly refreshed. The disorientation hadn't completely disappeared, but the edge had been taken off. He sat up, stretching his stiff muscles. Rhea was still there, sitting in the same position as before. She looked up at him, her teal eyes bright and alert. She held a piece of smooth bark in her hands, using a sharpened twig to draw on its surface. She held up the bark for him to see. On it, she had drawn a crude picture of his ship, plummeting through the sky. Below that, she had drawn a question mark. He understood immediately. She wanted to know about his ship. He took the bark from her and added to the drawing, sketching in more details of the ship's design. Then, he drew a picture of Earth, a swirling blue and green sphere. He pointed to the Earth drawing, then to himself. Rhea studied the drawing intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. She seemed to be struggling to grasp the scale of what he was trying to convey. She added to the drawing, sketching in the outline of Gamilos, then drawing a tiny speck next to it. She pointed to the speck, then to the Earth drawing, then back to the speck. He realized what she was trying to say. She was trying to understand how far he had traveled. He nodded, impressed by her intelligence. He took the bark again and drew a series of concentric circles around the Earth drawing, each circle representing a greater distance. He pointed to the outermost circle, then to his ship drawing. Rhea's eyes widened. She seemed to finally grasp the vastness of space, the incredible distance he had crossed to reach her world. She erased the drawing of his ship and instead drew a picture of a group of figures, all identical in appearance. She pointed to the figures, then to Nolan, then back to the figures. He frowned, confused. Was she asking about his crew? He shook his head and drew a picture of a man and a woman holding hands. He pointed to the man, then to himself. Then he pointed to the woman and shrugged, indicating he didn't have one. Rhea tilted her head, her expression puzzled. She erased the drawing of the two figures and drew a single figure, then drew a circle around it. She pointed to the figure, then to herself. He realized what she was trying to say. She was asking about his family, his group. But she didn't seem to understand the concept of different genders, of males and females. He took the bark and drew a picture of a male and female human, clearly differentiating their physical characteristics. He pointed to the male figure, then to himself. Then he pointed to the female figure. The gamelons gasped, their eyes wide with astonishment. They crowded around the drawing, examining it with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. They whispered to each other in their melodic language, their voices filled with wonder. Rhea reached out and gently touched his face, her fingers tracing the outline of his jawline. Her touch was light, almost reverent. She seemed to be studying his features, trying to understand the differences between him and her. He felt a blush creep up his neck. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, this intense, unfiltered curiosity. Rhea took the bark again and drew a complex diagram, filled with swirling lines and geometric shapes. She pointed to the diagram, then to herself, then to the other gamelons. She seemed to be explaining their method of reproduction, their way of creating new life. He studied the diagram, trying to decipher its meaning. It seemed to suggest a form of parthenogenesis, a way of reproducing without the need for males. But the details were unclear, shrouded in alien biology and symbolism. The gamelons, their shock subsiding, began to examine his equipment. They reached for his pack, his boots, his enviro suit. One of them reached for his weapon, her fingers tracing its smooth, metallic surface. Nolan tensed. He didn't like this. He didn't want them touching his weapon. They didn't understand what it was, what it could do. He reached out to stop them, but it was too late. One alien held the weapon now, gripping it firmly in her hands. She peered down its length, her brow furrowed in concentration. He tried to show the danger, shaking his head and making quick gestures. He pointed to the weapon, then made a cutting motion at his neck. He tried to convey the concept of harm, of death, but his efforts seemed futile. They didn't understand. Rhea, however, seemed to grasp his concern. She stepped forward, her expression serious. She spoke a few sharp words to the gamelon holding the rifle, her voice filled with authority. The gamelon hesitated, then reluctantly handed the rifle to Rhea. Rhea examined the weapon with a focused intensity, her fingers tracing its contours. She seemed to be trying to understand its function, not just through observation, but through some kind of empathic sense. She paused, as if hearing the signal. Quickly, her fingers found the button. A loud sound echoed through the dwelling. The figures cried out, scattering in sudden panic. Nolan ducked, his heart pounding in his chest. A small hole appeared in the wall of the dwelling, a few feet from where he had been sitting, the air filled with the smell of ozone and burnt plant fibers. Rhea stared at the tool in her hands, her eyes wide with shock. She hadn't meant to use it. It had been an accident. Nolan scrambled to his feet, startled and rushing with energy. He took the tool from Rhea, his hands unsteady. He checked the setting, ensuring it was secure and firm. He aimed the tool at a far-off post, away from the house. He made a short, quick test. The tree exploded in a shower of splinters and leaves. The gamelons stared at the tree, their faces a mixture of awe and terror. They had never seen anything like it. They had never witnessed such raw, destructive power. He carefully secured the item, making it safe. He held out the item to Rhea, offering it back. She paused, then took the item. Their hands brushed. Her expression was a mixture of fear and respect. She seemed to understand the responsibility that came with such power. He pointed to the rifle, then to himself, then to her. He was entrusting her with his weapon, with his knowledge. He was signaling his trust. Rhea nodded, her eyes meeting his. She understood. She drew a picture of a series of interconnected circles, each circle representing a different role or responsibility within their society. She pointed to each circle in turn, explaining its function with a series of gestures and vocalizations. He gathered that their society was highly structured, with different gamelons specializing in different tasks. There seemed to be a council of elders responsible for making important decisions. There were also scientists, artists, and healers, but there were no warriors, no soldiers. They had no need for them. Rhea drew a symbol, a stylized image of a blooming flower, then crossed it out with a bold line. She pointed to the symbol, then to the sky. He didn't understand. What did the flower represent? What did the crossed-out symbol mean? Rhea drew a picture of his ship, lying broken in the forest. She pointed to the ship, then to Nolan, her expression questioning. She wanted to see his ship. She wanted to understand its technology, its origins. As they communicated, Rhea suddenly tensed. Her eyes narrowed, and she tilted her head slightly, as if listening to something far away. A faint tremor ran through her body. She drew a series of jagged lines on the bark, then pointed to the sky. Her expression was grave. He didn't understand what she was trying to say, but he could feel her unease. Something was wrong. Something was coming. A faint, metallic glint appeared in the sky, high above the canopy of the alien forest. It grew larger, resolving into the unmistakable shape of a ship. But it wasn't one of his ships. It was sleeker, more angular, with a dark, menacing silhouette. A Zakral scout ship, entering Gamilos's atmosphere. The air thrummed, a subtle vibration that resonated not through the ground, but through the very leaves of the bioluminescent flora. It was a frequency Nolan recognized instantly, the telltale signature of a high-powered scan. He'd felt it 1,000 times before, just before the shooting started. His gut clenched. The Zakral ship, a wedge of obsidian against the violet sky, had been orbiting peacefully enough, a silent observer. Now, that silence felt predatory. Nolan's training screamed at him. This wasn't a survey. It was a hunt. He cursed under his breath. He needed to warn them. He fumbled for his comm device, thumbing the activation rune. Static. He tried again. Cycling through frequencies. Nothing but white noise. The Zakral were jamming him. They knew he was here, knew what he was. Shit. Rhea, he said, his voice tight, grabbing her arm gently. He pointed skyward, then mimed the ship descending, his hand swooping down like a hawk. He made a fist, then slammed it into his open palm. Attack. He wasn't sure how much she understood, but he had to try. Rhea's amber eyes widened, her teal skin shimmering with a faint, rapid pulse. She placed a hand on his arm, a gesture of reassurance or perhaps understanding. Zakral, she said, the word a soft, almost musical sound. Skywalkers. Observers. Not just observers. Nolan growled. Frustration building. He needed them to understand. The gamelons around them continued their daily routines, tending to the glowing plants, their faces serene. oblivious. It was like trying to explain calculus to a field of grazing livestock. They had no concept of this. He dropped to his knees, grabbing a stick and scratching furiously in the soft, phosphorescent earth. He drew a crude representation of the Z-Crawl ship, then stick figures with jagged lines representing weapons. He drew one figure striking another. He pointed at the drawing, then at the ship, then made the striking motion again. The landing craft, a smaller version of the orbiting vessel, detached and began its descent. It was sleek, menacing, utterly out of place amidst the organic beauty of Gamilos. The hum grew louder, a discordant counterpoint to the chirping of the local fauna. The Gamelon's inherent curiosity, their driving need to understand, overrode any sense of caution. Several of them began to drift toward the descending craft, their faces alight with innocent wonder. "No! Stop!" Nolan shouted, scrambling to his feet. He grabbed the arm of the nearest Gamelon, a young female with intricate bioluminescent patterns on her face, and pulled her back. She looked at him, startled, confused. He pointed at the landing craft, shaking his head vehemently. "Danger! Bad!" Rhea stepped forward, placing a hand on Nolan's shoulder. She spoke rapidly to the other Gamelons in their melodic language, but they seemed unmoved, their attention still fixed on the descending craft. The landing craft touched down with a hiss of compressed air, its ramp extending to the ground. The silence that followed was broken only by the chirping of insects and the frantic pounding of Nolan's heart. 3 figures emerged from the craft. Zekro. Reptilian humanoids clad in dark, armored suits, energy weapons slung across their chests. Their eyes, cold and reptilian, scanned the Gamelons with predatory interest. The lead Zekral raised a device, a scanner, and swept it across the Gamelons, its beam painting them in an eerie green light. He spoke in a guttural, rasping language that sent a shiver down Nolan's spine, even though he couldn't understand the words. It was the tone, the sheer malice in his voice. Rhea stiffened beside him, her bioluminescent patterns flickering erratically. He could feel her fear, her growing understanding of the threat. They need, she faltered, striving for common words. To get. Nolan raised his idle weapon, holding it in sight. A signal, a pretense. He knew it was little more than a paperweight against their technology, but he had to show them he wasn't defenseless. The Z-Crawl barely glanced at him, their reptilian eyes dismissive. They saw him for what he was. A primitive, outmatched. Their interest was solely on the Gamelons. One of the Z-Crawl reached out, his clawed hand grasping for a young Gamelon female standing near the front. She gasped, her eyes widening in terror. Nolan reacted without thinking. He surged forward, slamming his shoulder into the Z-Crawl, knocking him off balance. The Z-Crawl stumbled back, hissing in anger. The lead Z-Crawl raised his weapon. A bolt of energy erupted from the barrel, searing the air inches from Nolan's face. The smell of ozone filled his nostrils. He flinched, but stood his ground. He grabbed Rhea and pulled her, along with the other Gamelons, behind a massive gnarled tree, its roots forming a natural barrier. He crouched low, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He was outgunned, outmatched, and surrounded by innocents who didn't understand the danger they were in. But he was all that stood between them and the Z-Crawl, and he wasn't about to back down. The first energy blast scorched the ground a meter from Nolan's head, showering him with dirt and the acrid smell of ionized flora. He didn't need Terran Alliance sensors to tell him they were under attack. "Down," he roared, shoving Rhea behind the meager cover of a massive bioluminescent root. The natural barrier offered little protection. Energy weapons chewed through the Gamilo's vegetation, like plasma through butter, showering the area with burning sap and sparking embers. Nolan risked a quick glance. The gamelons, clustered together, were exposed, their teal skin glowing with fear. They were going to get slaughtered. He gritted his teeth, his mind racing. He needed a plan, and fast. His gaze swept across the alien landscape, cataloging every detail. The density of the surrounding forest, the types of flora, the contours of the land. There, a cluster of bulbous plants, their surfaces shimmering with an oily sheen. He remembered the gamelon explanation. Explosive seed pods. Rhea, he said, his voice tight. Those plants, the ones with the shiny pods. Are they explosive? Rhea's amber eyes widened. The catharpods? Yes, but we need them, now. Nolan scrambled out from behind the root, ignoring the whine of another energy blast passing overhead. He yanked one of the pods from its stem. It was surprisingly light, about the size of a Terran grenade. Rhea, understanding dawning in her eyes, moved with a speed that belied her graceful appearance. She began ripping the pods from their stems, her enhanced strength allowing her to gather them in armfuls. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice barely audible above the din of the attack. "Make them regret they ever landed on Gamilos," Nolan replied grimly. The other gamelons watched with a mixture of fear and confusion. They recoiled from the catharpods as if they were venomous snakes. "Violence is never the answer," one of them whispered, her skin dimming with distress. Nolan ignored her. He needed to show them. He needed them to understand the alternative. He selected a pod, moved a safe distance away from the huddled gamelons, and tossed it against a nearby rock. The explosion was surprisingly powerful. A concussive blast ripped through the air, followed by a shower of burning plant matter. The ground shook. The gamelons gasped, their eyes wide with shock. "That," Nolan said, his voice hard, "is what the Z-Crawl are going to do to you, to your home, unless you fight back." Understanding began to dawn in Rhea's eyes. She looked at the pods in her arms, then at Nolan, then at the advancing Z-Crawl. "Show us what to do," she said, her voice resolute. Nolan nodded. "First we throw. Like this." He demonstrated a simple overhand throw, aiming at a distant tree. "Aim for the Z-Crawl. Aim to kill." The gamelons hesitated. Their hands trembled as they picked up the catharpods. They had never held a weapon before, never intentionally harmed another living being. "They will not show mercy," Nolan said, his voice low but firm. "They will enslave you. They will destroy your world. You must protect yourselves." Rhea stepped forward, her teal skin glowing with commitment. She hefted a catharpod, her movements fluid and graceful. "Like this?" she asked, mimicking Nolan's throw. "Exactly," Nolan said, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Now, all together, aim and throw." The gamelons, spurred by Rhea's example, began to throw. The catharpods arced through the air, a volley of improvised explosives aimed at the advancing Z-Crawl. The explosions ripped through the Z-Crawl ranks, catching them by surprise. Burning plant matter rained down on them, disrupting their advance. The Z-Crawl warriors, caught in the blast, staggered back, their armor scorched and smoking. "Yes!" Nolan shouted, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "Keep throwing! Don't let them get close!" The gamelons, emboldened by their initial success, continued to hurl the catharpods. The air filled with the sound of explosions and the screams of the Z-Crawl. But Nolan knew it wouldn't last. The Z-Crawl were regrouping, adjusting their tactics. This was only a temporary reprieve. "They'll be back," Nolan said, his voice grim. "They'll adapt. They'll bring reinforcements. This isn't over. One of the gamelons, her skin dimming with doubt, stepped forward. Perhaps we could reason with them? Explain that we mean them no harm? Nolan stared at her, incredulous. Reason with them? They're here to take your world. There's no reasoning with them. An older gamelon, her face etched with concern, approached. Sergeant King, she said, her voice imbued with ancient wisdom, we appreciate your assistance, but violence is not our way. We have lived in peace for millennia. Perhaps there is another solution. Rhea stepped forward, her bioluminescence flaring with anger. Elder Lyra, they attacked us. Sergeant King saved us. We must heed his counsel. The gamelons murmured quietly, their faces troubled. Nolan could see hesitation growing now. The elder's words had aligned with their gentle nature. Frustration welled up inside Nolan. He couldn't believe their naivety. You don't understand, he said, his voice rising. They won't stop. They won't listen. You have to fight. But his words seemed to fall on deaf ears. The gamelons were divided, their fear of violence outweighing their fear of the Zekral. Suddenly, the ground began to tremble. A low rumble filled the air. The sound of approaching engines. Nolan's heart sank. Reinforcements. A Zekral dropship descended from the sky, landing heavily in a nearby clearing. A ramp lowered, and a squad of heavily armed Zekral warriors emerged, their energy weapons charged and ready. The gamelons gasped, their eyes wide with terror. Nolan looked at Rhea, his face grim. Looks like our honeymoon's over, he said. Rhea met his gaze, her amber eyes filled with a mixture of fear and tenacity. Then, let's make sure they remember it, she replied. The fate of Gamilos, and perhaps the future of their unlikely bond, rested on their shoulders. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and facing a divided populace, but they would fight. They had to. Energy bolts ripped through the air, where they'd been standing a heartbeat before, showering them with pulverized, glowing moss. Nolan shoved Rhea behind a thick, pulsating fungus, the air thick with the smell of ozone and singed vegetation. Rhea, get behind me, he barked, his voice tight. Even if she didn't understand the words, the urgency was clear. Others, seed pods now, focus fire. He risked a glance back. Gamelon scrambled to obey, launching another volley of seed pods. The resulting explosions lit the clearing in a violent, strobing light. But this time, the Zekral were ready. Energy shields shimmered, deflecting some of the blasts, minimizing the damage. The gamelons cried out in frustration. Then, the ground shook as the Zekral ground troops advanced, their reptilian faces contorted in snarls. They engaged the gamelons in brutal close-quarters combat. Nolan winced as he saw a gamelon warrior, barely more than a girl, grapple with a Zekral twice her size. But the gamelons, despite their lack of formal training, possessed a surprising strength. They used their powerful limbs to grapple with the Zekral, disarming them with surprising ease and disrupting their formations. One gamelon wrestled a Zekral to the ground and, with a guttural roar, smashed its head against a root. A cry, sharp and piercing, cut through the din. An older gamelon, her bioluminescence usually a soft, calming glow, now pulsed with frantic energy, had fallen. The elder. Something shifted in the clearing. The elder, witnessing the bravery and the losses, let out a rallying cry in the gamelon language, her bioluminescence flaring brighter than Nolan had ever seen. It was a sound of defiance, of protection, of pure, unadulterated rage. Inspired, the gamelons fought with renewed vigor, using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. They ducked behind bioluminescent trees, ambushed Zekro from hidden tunnels, and used the slippery moss to trip their enemies. The Zekro warriors, clad in their dark armor, were clearly frustrated by the Gamelon's unexpected resistance. Their guttural commands grew harsher, their attacks more reckless. Amidst the chaos, Nolan's soldier's instincts kicked in. He observed the Zekral's tactics, noticing a pattern. They weren't attacking randomly, they were consistently targeting specific Gamelon individuals. Rhea suddenly clutched her head, her face contorted in pain. "They," she gasped, her voice barely audible above the din. "They want the ones who shine brightest." Nolan's mind raced. Resources were secondary. These weren't just raiders. They want to weaponize these women, their biology, he thought, a cold dread settling in his stomach. His gaze snapped to Rhea. Her unique bioluminescence, her empathic ability. She wasn't just a target, she was the aim. "Stay close to me." "Now," he requested, guiding her further back near the glowing plant. He raised his weapon, his grip firm. The Zekral, heeding new orders, focused their fire on Nolan, attempting to circle him and get to Rhea. Energy blasts impacted the growth, sending splinters of bright material flying. Nolan struggled, halting foes with aimed shots. Still, they pressed on. An energy blast hit his side, damaging his suit. He winced, his vision blurring briefly. Rhea, seeing Nolan wounded, her eyes wide with terror and commitment, unleashed a wave of bioluminescent energy. The clearing erupted in a blinding flash of teal light. The Zekral stumbled back, momentarily stunned, their reptilian eyes blinking rapidly. "Now run," Nolan yelled, grabbing Rhea's hand. He ignored the searing pain in his side, adrenaline coursing through his veins. They plunged into the dense Gamelon forest, the glowing foliage blurring around them. The Zekral, recovering quickly, pursued them relentlessly, their heavy footsteps echoing through the trees. Nolan stumbled, his wound slowing them down. Rhea helped him stay upright, her small hand surprisingly strong. They burst into a small clearing, gasping for breath. But their hope was short-lived. A group of Zekro warriors stood waiting, their energy weapons trained on them. They were trapped. Behind them, the sheer cliff dropped into a dark abyss. There was no escape. Nolan didn't hesitate. The Zekral weapon's fire echoed, spitting emerald energy that sizzled against the cliff face where they'd been standing moments before. He hauled Rhea close, his arm a vice around her waist. "Hold on!" With a grunt born of pain and adrenaline, he leaped. The world blurred into a dizzying rush of wind and violet light. He felt Rhea tense against him, her teal skin cool beneath his hand. The drop was shorter than he'd anticipated, landing hard on a narrow ledge, jarring his already protesting ankle. He bit back a curse. More energy blasts ripped past, showering them with rock fragments. The Zekral weren't giving up. Nolan scanned the cliff face, his gaze sharp despite the throbbing in his leg. There, a narrow opening, barely wider than his shoulders, almost hidden by a curtain of phosphorescent moss. "This way." He pushed Rhea ahead of him, shielding her with his body as they squeezed through the opening. The moss brushed against his face, releasing a cool, earthy scent. They stumbled into darkness. A heavy, damp darkness that pressed in on all sides. The air hung thick and still, tasting of minerals and something faintly metallic. He could hear Rhea's quickened breathing beside him. The respite was short-lived. A guttural roar echoed from the entrance, followed by the scraping of claws on rock. The Zekral were inside. Suddenly, a section of the cave roof groaned, dust raining down on them. A split second later, it collapsed in a deafening roar, sealing the entrance with tons of rock and debris. Silence descended, broken only by Nolan's ragged breaths and the drip, drip, drip of water. They were trapped. He reached out, his hand brushing against the cool, smooth surface of the cave wall. The air was thick, almost suffocating. He could barely see his hand in front of his face. His ankle throbbed, a relentless white-hot pain that radiated up his leg. The fall had definitely aggravated the injury. He leaned heavily against the cave wall, gritting his teeth. Rhea winced beside him, her hand flying to her temple. "Nolan, your pain." Her voice was soft, filled with a strange concern. He frowned, confused. "It's just a sprain, Rhea. I'll be fine." "It's more than that," she whispered, her amber eyes wide. A faint, almost imperceptible shimmer emanated from her skin. He pushed the strange moment aside, focusing on their immediate predicament. "Do you know these caves?" "The Gamelon caves are vast," Rhea said, her voice regaining its strength. "They stretch for kilometers beneath the surface, but they are also dangerous. Unstable rock formations. Unique flora, some of which is volatile." "Volatile how?" "The Zekrol. They are not simply after resources," Rhea continued, her voice tight with anger. "They seek to weaponize Gamelon genetic material, to create bioweapons, to target other species." Nolan swore under his breath. That ratcheted up the stakes considerably. He had to get them out of here. He had to warn her people. He pushed himself away from the wall, ignoring the jolt of pain in his ankle. "Okay, we need to find another exit. You know these caves. I know tactics. Let's put our heads together." Rhea nodded, taking a deep breath. A soft, ethereal glow began to emanate from her skin, illuminating the small chamber. Strange, luminous fungi clung to the walls, casting eerie shadows that danced with her movements. For a fleeting instant, Nolan felt a jolt, a strange clarity. He saw the cave not as a dark, confined space, but as a network of interconnected tunnels, branching and twisting like the veins of a living organism. He blinked, and the vision was gone. "That way," Rhea said, pointing to a narrow passage leading deeper into the cave. "But be careful. The ground is unstable in places." As they moved forward, Nolan could feel the shift in the ground beneath his feet. A subtle tremor, a give in the earth that spoke of hidden sinkholes and treacherous collapses. Then they heard it. A rhythmic thudding, growing louder with each passing second. The unmistakable sound of digging, and beneath that, the high-pitched whine of energy weapons. The krill were digging through the blocked doorway. Rhea paused, her eyes filled with worry. "They are near." Nolan held his weapon tighter. "Then we must go. Now." They pressed on, deeper into the cave, until they reached a fork in the tunnel. One passage sloped downwards, disappearing into darkness. The other led to a slightly larger chamber, its walls shimmering with bioluminescent crystals. "That way," Rhea said, pointing to the deeper passage. "It is less stable, but it may lead to another exit." They had no choice. As they started down the passage, a deafening roar ripped through the cave system. The ground trembled violently. "They've broken through!" Rhea cried, her voice barely audible above the din. A blinding flash of emerald light erupted from the tunnel behind them, followed by the crackle of energy weapons fire. The Zekrol were coming, and they were coming fast. The first shot slammed into the rock face beside them, showering them with hot fragments. Nolan cursed, shoving Rhea behind a jagged outcropping. "Move!" "Go now," he called, the beam weapon sending light flashes into the thinning smoke. The tight passage gave some cover, but the foes were intent, their weapons hitting the cave walls. "This way!" Rhea shouted, grabbing his arm. She pulled him deeper into the chamber, the passage narrowing until they were forced to move single file. Suddenly, a chorus of clicks and hisses erupted from the darkness ahead. Bioluminescent shapes darted from the shadows, insectoid creatures with razor-sharp mandibles and glowing eyes, their bodies shimmering with an oily sheen. They swarmed, snapping at Nolan's legs. He raised the weapon, startling several, but more kept coming. Rhea moved with a speed he hadn't seen before, her hands a blur as she struck vital points, stopping the figures with precise strikes. He felt a surge, a jolt of adrenaline that wasn't entirely his own. His movements became faster, more fluid, mirroring Rhea's instinctive fighting style. He dodged a snapping mandible with impossible speed, his fist connecting with the creature's head with bone-jarring force. The bioresonance bond was amplifying them, turning them into a single deadly unit. The Zekro pressed their attack, ignoring the cave creatures as they advanced. "We can't hold them here," Nolan yelled, his voice strained. A searing pain lanced through his side. He stumbled, his vision blurring. The wound was worsening, the makeshift bandage soaked with blood. Rhea caught him, her strong arms supporting his weight. "Nolan, you're hurt!" "Just a scratch," he lied, gritting his teeth. But he knew it was more than that. He was slowing her down. She shifted his weight, half carrying him as they continued their retreat. "We have to keep moving." Her voice was tight with concern. "They're not just after us," she said suddenly, her expression hardening. "They're after the children." Nolan frowned, confused. "Children? What are you talking about?" "The Zekral," she explained, her voice trembling with rage. "They know about our unique genetic potential. They want to use our children for their bioweapon program." The words hit Nolan like a physical blow. Children. The thought of these ruthless scavengers targeting innocent children ignited a fire in his gut, a cold, burning rage that eclipsed the pain in his side. He straightened, pushing Rhea's support away. "Damn it all," he spat on the cave floor. "Not on my watch." Rhea stared at him, her amber eyes wide with a mixture of fear and admiration. "Nolan, we have to stop them," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "No matter what." Rhea nodded, her persistence firming. "I know a way." She pointed to a dark crevice behind a waterfall of shimmering, bioluminescent liquid. "A hidden passage. It leads to the ancient chamber." She moved to the waterfall, placing her hand on the rock face beside it. With a gentle push, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage. "The ancient chamber?" Nolan asked, his breath catching in his throat. "It holds a relic," Rhea explained. "A device of immense power. It could protect us, if we can activate it." They entered the passage, the air growing thick with the scent of ozone and something else. Something ancient and powerful. The passage opened into a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a structure of polished obsidian, pulsing with a soft internal light. An energy field shimmered around it, distorting the air. "What is it?" Nolan asked, awestruck. "A protector," Rhea said, her voice hushed with reverence. "It was built to defend us from threats we could not comprehend. But it has been dormant for centuries. Activating it will not be easy." The sounds of the Zekro were growing louder, closer. They were about to break through. "We don't have time for easy," Nolan said, his hand resting on the hilt of his knife. They approached the relic, Rhea reaching out to touch its surface. Nothing happened. She tried again, focusing her energy, but the structure remained inert. "It's no use," she said, her voice filled with despair. "I don't know how to activate it." Suddenly, a rush of images flooded Nolan's mind. A young Rhea, no older than 10, dressed in ceremonial robes, participating in a ritual around the relic. Chanting, dancing, the air filled with the scent of burning herbs. He gasped, clutching his head. "Nolan, what is it?" Rhea asked, her voice filled with concern. "The ritual," he said, his voice hoarse. "I saw it. A memory. You were a child." Rhea's eyes widened. "The awakening ritual. It was forbidden. The elders said it was too dangerous." "But it's the key, isn't it?" Nolan pressed. "It's how we activate the relic. I haven't performed it in years," Rhea stammered. "And I don't know if I can do it alone. It requires synchronization. A shared intent." The sounds of the Z-crawl echoed through the passage, growing louder with each passing second. They were almost here. "Then we'll do it together," Nolan said, his eyes locking with Rhea's. "Whatever it takes." He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. As they began to chant the ancient words, the chamber door exploded inward, showering them with rock and dust. The Z-crawl warriors stormed into the chamber, their weapons trained on Nolan and Rhea. They ignored the newcomers, focusing all their will on the relic. The chanting grew louder, their voices blending together, their bodies swaying in unison. But nothing happened. The relic remained dormant. The Z-crawl opened fire. Nolan shoved Rhea to the ground, throwing himself on top of her, shielding her body with his own. Energy bolts ripped through the air, impacting the relic. With a deafening roar, the obsidian structure pulsed with blinding light. A wave of energy surged outwards, engulfing the chamber, its effects unknown. The world exploded in white. Sergeant Nolan King felt himself lifted, tossed like a ragdoll in a hurricane of pure energy. A roaring filled his ears, drowning out the sounds of battle, the alien chanting, everything. Pain lanced through him, a searing agony that stole his breath. Then, darkness. He blinked, struggling to focus. The chamber was different. Bioluminescent fungi pulsed with an almost frantic intensity, casting the cavern in a strobe-like glow. Jagged rock formations, once solid, now seemed to writhe and shift, as if the very stone was alive. The air crackled, raising the hairs on his arms beneath his envirosuit. A guttural scream tore through the chaos. Nolan spotted several Z-crawl warriors, convulsing, their armor straining against grotesque bulges erupting beneath. One alien's arm elongated, bones snapping as it stretched into a grotesque, pulsating appendage. Another's face contorted, eyes bulging as raw energy arced from its skull. Then, a thought, clear as a bell, resonated in Nolan's mind. "Nolan, the children!" It wasn't his voice, but Rhea's. He felt her fear, her desperate need to protect her people, as if it were his own. "Rhea?" he thought back, confusion warring with a growing sense of connection. To your left, a hidden alcove, the rock face. "It's thinner there." Her mental voice was urgent, precise. "There's a passage." He didn't hesitate. Trusting her implicitly, Nolan scrambled towards the left wall, ignoring the mutated Z-crawl thrashing around him. The Z-crawl leader stood amidst the carnage, seemingly untouched by the relic's energy. His reptilian eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on Nolan. "Secure the relic," he barked, his voice amplified by his helmet's Vox unit. "Capture the Gamelon and the human, alive. You think you can control this power?" The Z-crawl leader's voice dripped with malice. "Foolish primitives. This relic, it's the final component, the key to our bioweapon. Soon the Gamelon's precious genetic code will be rewritten to our specifications." Nolan felt a throbbing in his side, a dull ache from the earlier wound. Except, it wasn't aching, it was healing. He touched the spot beneath his suit. The torn fabric was knitting itself back together, the pain receding with unnatural speed. The relic's energy and the bond with Rhea were accelerating his own body's repair mechanisms. The relic at the chamber's center pulsed again, this time violently. The light intensified, casting grotesque shadows that danced across the walls. The air vibrated with a low, ominous hum. The ritual, Rhea's voice echoed in his mind, imbued with panic. We have to complete the ritual. It's not just for activation, it's for control. To stabilize the energy before it destroys us all. The Zakral leader overheard Rhea's mental cry. Stop them, he roared. Prevent them from completing the ritual. Nolan moved, a whirlwind of Terran coalition training and instinct. He had to buy Rhea time. He saw the Gamelon children huddled near the alcove, fear etched on their faces. He would not let them be hurt. He raised his weapon, sending short, aimed shots at the foes. Rhea, meanwhile, began speaking again, her voice a beacon in the fray. Left, Nolan. He's flanking you. Rhea's mental warning came just in time. Nolan whirled, narrowly dodging a blast from a Zakral energy weapon. He returned fire, hitting the alien square in the chest. The mutated Zakral, writhing in agony, began attacking their own comrades, their uncontrolled energy blasts tearing through the ranks. The Zakral formation dissolved into a chaotic free-for-all. Just as Rhea reached the critical point in the ritual, a mutated Zakral, its body grotesquely swollen, lunged forward. It smashed a clawed hand into the control panel of the relic, severing a vital conduit. A wave of raw energy surged outward, throwing Rhea back. The chamber groaned, the ceiling cracking under the strain. Debris rained down, chunks of rock and glowing fungi. Without thinking, Nolan threw himself in front of Rhea, shielding her from the falling debris. A large chunk of rock slammed into his back, driving the air from his lungs. Pain exploded through him, as darkness threatened to engulf him. Rhea's mind brushed against his. A flood of images, chaotic and terrifying. He saw the Gamelon's future, a vibrant, thriving civilization, and a desolate wasteland, consumed by uncontrolled energy. The relic held both possibilities. The Zakral leader, seeing his opportunity in the chaos, grabbed a jagged fragment of the relic, shoving it into a reinforced container. Fools! He bellowed. You have only delayed the inevitable. He activated his personal teleportation device and vanished in a flash of light, escaping the collapsing chamber. Darkness closed in. Nolan felt the weight of the rubble pressing down on him, the heat of the unstable relic radiating outwards. He heard Rhea's voice, faint and distant, calling his name. He was trapped. The chamber was collapsing, and the relic was about to unleash its full, devastating power. Nolan's gaze, sharp and assessing, even through the dust coating his eyelashes, swept across the collapsed chamber. Chunks of plascrete and twisted metal latticework formed a haphazard mountain, but he saw more than just rubble. He saw stress fractures, load-bearing points, a potential avenue. There's a weakness, high up on the west side. Looks like a support beam buckled. Rhea's hand tightened on his arm, her teal skin shimmering faintly. Nolan, I feel it again. A surge. The relic. It's about to release another energy spike. We don't have much time. He gritted his teeth, pulling a jagged piece of Zakral armor from the debris, a curved plate of obsidian-like material, surprisingly light. This'll have to do. He wedged the armor plate into a narrow crevice near the buckled beam. Need to create some leverage. Rhea closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. Her voice, A soft whisper in his mind through their link guided him. A little to the left. Yes. Now, push down hard. There's a pocket of weakened material just above that point. Avoid the primary support strut. It will destabilize the entire section. He strained, muscles burning, as he forced the makeshift lever. The metal groaned, a high-pitched whine that vibrated through his bones. A small section of the rubble shifted, revealing a narrow passage, barely wide enough to squeeze through. "That's it," he grunted, shoving harder. "Go! I'm right behind you." Rhea didn't hesitate. She slid into the opening, her lithe form disappearing into the darkness. Nolan followed, scraping his suit against the jagged edges of the debris. Dust filled his nostrils, the scent of ozone sharp in the air. Just as he cleared the opening, a deafening roar echoed behind them. The entire chamber ceiling collapsed, burying the relic fragment under tons of rock and metal. They stumbled out into the open air, coughing and gasping. The once lush foliage surrounding the chamber was scorched and blackened, the bioluminescent flora extinguished in a wide radius. The air crackled with residual energy. Rhea swayed, her hand flying to her head. The vision, it's clearer now. The relic, it's not just power. Each, a key. The fate of my people rests on controlling its energy. Nolan's mind raced. The Zekral, they weren't just after the power source. They were after something specific. He remembered the fragmented data packets he'd intercepted. The bioweapon. It's not a general plague. It's designed to target a specific genetic marker, isn't it? Something unique to the Gamelons. The horror in Rhea's eyes confirmed his suspicion. Yes, she breathed. It would cause sterility, widespread illness, our people unable to continue. Nolan's mind focused. He understood now. They don't want to exterminate you. They want to enslave you. Cripple your ability to reproduce, to continue your civilization. Wipe you out slowly, painfully. A wave of nausea washed over him. A sudden, overwhelming flood of Rhea's emotions, fear, despair, a deep-seated sorrow that resonated within his own soul. Images flashed through his mind. Gamelon children playing in sunlit meadows. Ancient rituals passed down through generations. The vibrant tapestry of their culture slowly fading into nothingness. The force of it nearly buckled his knees. He gasped, breaking the telepathic link. "Rhea! What was that?" Her face was pale, her bioluminescence dimmed. "The history, it flooded you. I'm sorry. The Gamelons. We suppressed so much. The relic, the great silence. We hid it all, buried it deep within our minds to prevent its power from falling into the wrong hands. The Zekral. They must have known." "The great silence?" Nolan prompted, trying to reconcile the idyllic society he had seen with this revelation of a suppressed history. "Generations ago," Rhea began, her voice heavy with sorrow, "there was a schism within our society, a conflict over the relic's power. It led to a great loss. We chose to suppress the knowledge, to forget. But some things cannot be forgotten." "Is that why you don't have males?" Nolan asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. Rhea didn't answer directly. Instead, she changed the subject. "There is ancient Gamelon technology, designed to dampen and control the relic's energy. Energy dampeners. A facility. Hidden somewhere on this planet. Where? I know the general location, but to pinpoint its exact coordinates, I need to access a specific data archive." Just then, Nolan's comm crackled to life. A burst of static, followed by a fragmented voice in guttural Zikral. He quickly filtered the signal, translating the alien language. Settlement, extraction, information. Nolan's expression hardened. They're heading towards a Gamelon settlement. Which one? Rhea asked, her voice filled with urgency. I don't know, but if I had to guess. Nolan trailed off, his gaze locking with Rhea's. The settlement. It's likely the location of the data archive you need. They're after the same thing. A chilling realization settled upon them. The Zikral weren't just after the relic fragment, they were targeting the knowledge needed to weaponize it fully. We have a choice to make, Nolan said, his voice grim. Prioritize rescuing the settlement and protecting the archive, or focus on securing the remaining relic fragment and preventing the bioweapon activation. Rhea's teeth clenched. We can't do both. Not at the same time, Nolan agreed. I have an idea, Rhea said, her eyes gleaming with willpower. We split up. You head to the settlement. Protect the archive. I need to find someone who can help me stabilize the relic fragment. Someone who understands its power. Nolan's brow furrowed. Split up? That's insane, Rhea. It's too dangerous. The Z-Crow. They won't hesitate. But it's the only way, Rhea insisted. We can't let them get their hands on the archive. And if that relic fragment isn't contained, it could destroy everything. What about the link? Nolan countered. If we're separated, how will we stay connected? How will I know you're safe? The enhanced telepathic link, Rhea reminded him, reaching out to touch his hand. A faint pulse of energy flowed between them, a tangible connection that transcended physical distance. It will allow us to maintain contact, provide support. I will not be alone, Nolan. I will find allies. Nolan hesitated, torn. He hated the idea of leaving her, of sending her into danger alone. But he knew she was right. Time was running out. He took a deep breath, steeling himself. All right, he said, his voice tight. Temporary separation. But only if you promise me something. Rhea looked at him, her amber eyes filled with a mixture of dedication and concern. Anything. Promise me, you'll prioritize your safety, Nolan said, his voice firm. And promise me you'll seek assistance. Don't try to handle this alone. Find trusted Gamelon allies, people you know you can count on. Rhea nodded, her expression resolute. I promise. I will not be reckless, Nolan. I will do everything in my power to protect my people. And you. He pushed through a curtain of phosphorescent vines, their touch leaving a faint tingling on his skin even through the enviro suit. The terrain was a treacherous mix of slick, moss-covered rocks and deceptively soft-looking fungi that crumbled underfoot, threatening to send him sprawling. Each step was a battle against gravity and exhaustion. The alien outpost couldn't be much further, but every kilometer felt like 10. A sharp sound cut through the forest sounds. Nolan dropped to a crouch, his weapon raised high. 3 Zikral, clad in their segmented armor, were attempting to flank the settlement, their blasters spitting bolts of emerald energy that vaporized the surrounding flora. They moved with practiced efficiency, clearly veterans. He had to stop them. Using the glowing foliage as cover, Nolan moved silently, circling behind the group. He struck a group of volatile plants, scattering the Zikral. As they turned back, he downed 2 with quick shots from his rifle. The third, bigger than the rest, yelled loudly and rushed. Nolan dodged the wild attack and hit the end of his rifle on the foe's weak spot. The creature fell down, its body shaking. The skirmish had cost him precious time, and the effort left his ankle screaming in protest. He gritted his teeth, and pressed on. The Gamelon settlement was a cluster of organically shaped structures woven into the living trees, their surfaces glowing with intricate patterns. But the initial welcome was far from warm. Several Gamelon females, armed with energy weapons that hummed with contained power, barred his path. Their expressions were a mixture of fear and hostility. A tall Gamelon, her skin a deep sapphire blue, and her eyes narrowed with suspicion, stepped forward. "You are the male?" Her voice, amplified by a translator, was sharp. Before Nolan could answer, an older Gamelon pushed through the crowd. Her skin was etched with intricate bioluminescent patterns that spoke of age and authority. Her gaze was piercing, assessing. "What is your purpose here, stranger? The Z-Kral have never dared attack us before. Your arrival coincides with their aggression. Explain yourself." Nolan met her gaze, his own steady. "My ship crashed. I'm a soldier, Sergeant Nolan King. I know how to fight, and those Z-Kral will be back. I can help you defend yourselves." The elder remained unmoved. "We have defended ourselves for generations without the need for males. Your presence is a disruption, a danger." Suddenly, a voice echoed in Nolan's mind, clear and urgent. "Nolan, they are close, very close. You must prepare. There is little time." It was Rhea. He turned back to the elder. "With respect, elder, time is a luxury we don't have. Rhea is right. They're coming. Now, are you going to let me help? Or are you going to let your people die because of your prejudice?" His bluntness seemed to momentarily stun the elder. Nolan seized the opportunity. He began issuing orders, his voice authoritative. "We need to fortify the perimeter. Choke points, traps. Use the environment. Those plants that explode on impact, cluster them. The vines that can ensnare, weave them into barriers." To his surprise, the Gamelons, initially hesitant, began to respond. He pointed, gestured, and used simple diagrams in the dirt to convey his instructions. His genuine concern for their safety, his clear tactical knowledge, began to win them over. The Gamelons, despite their lack of experience with organized warfare, were incredibly resourceful. They quickly adapted Nolan's ideas, using their energy-based technology and their knowledge of the local flora to create elaborate traps. Bioluminescent plants were rigged to emit blinding flashes of light, while others released clouds of debilitating spores. They even managed to weaponize the energy-draining properties of certain fungi, creating fields that would weaken the Z-Kral's armor. As the defensive preparations progressed, small, metallic drones began to appear in the sky, their optics glinting ominously. The Z-Kral were coming. Nolan surveyed the settlement, his expression grim. They had created a series of choke points, funneling the Z-Kral into narrow corridors where they could be easily ambushed. The Gamelons, armed and ready, waited in the shadows, their faces determined. Meanwhile, Rhea had slipped away, seeking out a secluded group of Gamelon mystics who lived on the outskirts of the settlement. They were known for their deep connection to a relic fragment, a shard of ancient energy that pulsed with an otherworldly power. The mystics, their eyes milky white and their voices raspy, greeted Rhea with solemnity. "The relic stirs, child," one of them croaked. "Its energy is unstable. It senses the darkness approaching." "Can it help us?" Rhea asked urgently. The mystic shook her head. "Its power is unpredictable. It could protect us or destroy us. Tread carefully, Rhea. The relic song is a dangerous one." Back at the settlement, the Z-Kral launched their first wave of attack. Armored figures poured into the choke points, their blasters blazing. The Gamelons returned fire, their energy weapons cutting through the Z-Kral armor. But the Z-Kral were relentless, their numbers overwhelming the outer defenses. Nolan led a counterattack, using guerrilla warfare tactics to harass the Zekral and disrupt their advance. He moved like a ghost through the jungle, appearing and disappearing, taking down enemies with calculated precision. The Gamelons fought bravely, their initial fear replaced by a fierce persistence. They may have lacked combat experience, but they were defending their home, their families, their way of life. Suddenly, a wave of static crashed through Nolan's mind. The telepathic link with Rhea, his only source of real-time intelligence, was gone. He was blind. A hulking figure emerged from the chaos, its armor scarred, and its eyes burning with a cold, reptilian intelligence. The Zekral leader. He pointed a massive blaster directly at Nolan. "Human," he growled, his voice distorted by a vocoder. "You have interfered for the last time." The Zekral forces surged forward, overwhelming the remaining defenses. The settlement was falling. The situation was desperate. "Far away," Rhea gasped, clutching her head. A vision flooded her mind. A catastrophic future where the Zekral successfully activated the bioweapon, unleashing a plague that would extinguish all Gamelon life. Back at the heart of the settlement, Nolan stood his ground at the entrance to the data archive, the repository of all Gamelon knowledge and history. He knew he couldn't hold them off forever, but he would make them pay. He'd defend the Gamelon's record, even if he died. He raised his weapon, his face set and resolved. This was his final act. Nolan, hurt but bold, moved into the data storage area. The air tasted of ozone and burnt circuitry. Each echoing footstep of the pursuing Zekral sent vibrations through the metal floor, telegraphing their approach. He'd used the archive's labyrinthine layout to his advantage, disabling gravity panels in key corridors, rigging data consoles to explode with a touch, anything to slow them. A guttural roar echoed from the last intersection. He risked a glance. 3 Zekral, their reptilian eyes gleaming in the dim emergency lighting, rounded the corner, weapons raised. He ducked behind a fallen server rack, the metal groaning under his weight. A plasma blast sizzled past, melting the edge of the rack. Damn. He needed a better position. He risked another peek. One of the Zekral was dragging a Gamelon scientist by her iridescent hair. She wasn't moving. Rage, cold and sharp, pierced through Nolan's pain. He couldn't save everyone, but he could damn well make them pay for every life they took. He activated the proximity mine he'd planted earlier. A small, Coalition-issue device packed with enough punch to vaporize anything within a 5-meter radius. He just needed to lure them closer. Rhea's voice, strained and urgent, echoed in his mind, a telepathic whisper that bypassed the archive's crumbling .com systems. "Nolan, the mystics. They hesitate. The relic, it is unstable." He gritted his teeth. He didn't need a telepathic warning to know things were going to hell fast. He needed a miracle. Or a distraction. He triggered the mine. The explosion ripped through the corridor, a blinding flash followed by a deafening roar. The server rack bucked, throwing Nolan against the wall. He coughed, his lungs burning. When the dust settled, 2 of the Zekral were gone, reduced to smoking craters in the floor. The third lay twitching, its armor scorched. Then, a wave of nausea hit him. A searing pain that felt like his skull was about to crack open. He staggered, clutching his head. The relic. It was emitting a powerful pulse, amplifying the Gamelon's telepathic abilities, turning their thoughts into weapons, and agonizing pain. He wasn't the only one suffering. The surviving Zekral clutched its head, its movements jerky and uncoordinated. Their communications were scrambled. their battle plans dissolving into a cacophony of alien thoughts. He had to exploit this, now. He moved ahead, ignoring the ache, his weapon ready. The Zakral, confused and exposed, was an open target. He fired, a single sure shot that struck its armored head. Silence descended, broken only by the hum of the failing archive systems and the throbbing pain in his head. It was a temporary reprieve. He knew they'd adapt. They always did. And they did. He could see it in their movements, the subtle adjustments to their helmets, the way they started relying on hand signals instead of comms. Specialized helmets, blocking the telepathic signals, negating his advantage. Ria's voice, now infused with a desperate urgency, cut through the pain. I must. I see. Nolan, trust me. Then, a surge of raw power, a wave of energy that washed over him, both terrifying and exhilarating. He knew, instinctively, what Ria was doing. She was forcing the issue, taking control of the relic fragment, ignoring the mystic's warnings, channeling its energy. The archive shook, alarms blared. He stumbled, his vision blurring. More Zekro were closing in, their movements relentless, their weapons charged. He was overwhelmed. He was out of time. The Zekro leader, a hulking figure, with scarred mandibles and cold calculating eyes, stepped into the corridor, his weapon leveled at Nolan's chest. Human, he hissed, his voice a guttural rasp. Your resistance is inefficient. Surrender the data, and your death will be swift. Go to hell, Nolan spat, his hand instinctively reaching for a grenade. The data is significant, the Z-Crawl leader continued, ignoring Nolan's defiance. It concerns the Gamelon's unique reproductive abilities, a solution to our genetic crisis. The Gamelons? Their reproduction? What the hell were these bastards planning? Before Nolan could react, a stun blast slammed into him, sending him crashing to the floor. Darkness closed in. He tried to fight it, to resist, but it was too strong. He was captured, but as he fell, he activated the self-destruct sequence he'd rigged to the archive's core. A small act of defiance, a desperate gamble to prevent them from getting what they wanted. He awoke to the sound of alarms and the taste of blood. The archive was collapsing, sections of the ceiling caving in, sparks flying from severed power lines. The Zekra leader stood over him, his face contorted with rage. Fool, he roared. You have doomed yourself and accomplished nothing. The explosion ripped through the archive, a cataclysmic wave of fire and debris. Nolan blacked out again. When he regained consciousness, he was lying on the floor of a Z-Crawl transport ship, his hands bound, his head throbbing. The archive was gone, reduced to a smoking ruin. But the Z-Crawl leader was there, examining a data crystal salvaged from the wreckage. Incomplete, he snarled, crushing the crystal in his clawed hand. But sufficient. We have enough. Then, a wave of energy, a surge of power that resonated deep within his bones. The ship shuddered. Alarms blared. Ria. Outside, a shimmering barrier of pure energy had erupted around the Gamelon settlement, deflecting plasma blasts and repelling the Z-Crawl forces. The transport ship lurched violently, thrown back by the force of the energy surge. The Z-Crawl leader roared, his eyes burning with fury. The relic! She controls it! Focus all fire on the settlement. Capture the Gamelon female. But even as he gave the order, Nolan could feel Rhea weakening. The relic's energy drain was taking its toll. He could sense her pain, her exhaustion, her unwavering perseverance. He had to get to her. He had to stop them. Hours blurred into an agonizing eternity. Nolan, imprisoned on the Zakral ship, was subjected to interrogation. They demanded information about the relic, about the Gamelons, about their reproductive secrets. He refused to answer, his silence fueled by rage and a desperate hope that Rhea could hold out long enough. He could hear the screams of captured gamelons, the cold, clinical voices of the Z-Crawl scientists. They were experimenting on them, probing their bodies, dissecting their biology, searching for the key to their unique reproduction. Rhea's voice, faint but clear, echoed in his mind. Nolan, I see a choice. Sacrifice or risk. He knew what she meant. She could destroy the relic, severing the connection, permanently repelling the Z-Crawl. But it would cost her everything, her life, her people. Or she could risk using its power, unleashing unforeseen consequences, potentially dooming them all. Then, a fragmented vision, a fleeting glimpse of a hidden potential within the relic, a power to not just defend, but to fundamentally alter the Gamelon's future. And somehow, impossibly, he was part of it. He, Nolan King, the crashed and captured human soldier, was the key. Rhea's voice, stronger now, filled his mind, resolute and unwavering. I trust you, Nolan. I trust the vision. I choose to risk. He felt a surge of energy, a tidal wave of power building within her, within the relic. She was channeling everything, preparing to launch a desperate rescue mission, to save him, to save her people. But he knew, with a chilling certainty, that she had no idea what she was unleashing. Rhea's war cry echoed through the Z-Crawl ship's corridors, a sound like tearing metal and righteous fury. Her strike team, faces grim beneath their bioluminescent war paint, followed close behind, weapons charged with the relic's pulsating energy. Each blast left scorch marks on the metallic walls, the air thick with the smell of ozone and burning Z-Crawl flesh. The Z-Crawl, anticipating an assault, had turned the corridors into kill zones. Automated turrets fired energy blasts, and armored drones moved like agitated insects. But Rhea, fueled by a desperate need to reach Nolan, moved with preternatural speed, the relic amplifying her already formidable strength. She deflected plasma bolts with shimmering energy shields, her teal skin glowing brighter with each impact. Elsewhere, deep within the ship's bowels, Nolan worked feverishly. He ripped wires from control panels, rerouting power, overloading circuits. Sparks flew, illuminating his grim face. He knew it was a long shot, but every second of chaos he created was a second Rhea had to reach him. He muttered a curse as another panel sparked and died. Rhea's team breached the main defense line, the relic's energy dissolving the Z-Crawl's energy shields like morning mist. They moved through a mangled doorway, finding themselves in a dimly lit laboratory. Stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a Gamelon female, eyes vacant, bodies drained of their life force. Rage, cold and pure, flooded Rhea's veins. She saw screens displaying complex genetic sequences, equations swirling with stolen Gamelon secrets. The Z-Crawl had made progress, isolating a key genetic marker, the very essence of their reproductive abilities. Each pod represented a future stolen, a potential life extinguished. Rhea's grip tightened on the relic, its energy surging through her, a white-hot tide of vengeance. She had to reach Nolan. She had to protect her people. Nolan, meanwhile, had managed to disable the security grid in his sector. He slipped through the deactivated laser grid, his heart pounding against his ribs. Freedom was within reach. But as he rounded a corner, he found himself face to face with the Z-Crawl leader. The creature's reptilian eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. "Sergeant King," it hissed, its voice a dry rasp. "I've been expecting you." "You shouldn't have," Nolan growled. his hand instinctively reaching for the makeshift shiv he'd fashioned from a piece of broken metal. The Z-Crawl leader chuckled, a chilling sound. Your unique genetic makeup intrigues me. We've been studying the gamelons for cycles, attempting to unlock the secrets of their parthenogenesis. But you are an anomaly. A missing piece. Nolan's blood ran cold. We believe, the Z-Crawl leader continued, circling him like a predator, that your genes hold the key to creating a viable hybrid offspring, a fusion of human adaptability and gamelon reproductive prowess. A solution to our own genetic crisis. Before Nolan could react, the Z-Crawl leader lunged, his claws extended, but a blast of pure energy slammed into the creature, sending it staggering backward. Rhea stood in the doorway, her face a mask of fury, the relic blazing in her hand. "Get away from him," she snarled, her voice vibrating with power. The Z-Crawl leader snarled back, then charged. The battle was joined. As the Z-Crawl leader and Rhea clashed, Nolan felt a searing pain lance through his mind, a mirror of the agony etched on Rhea's face. The bioresonance bond, stretched to its breaking point, was amplifying their suffering. But with the pain came a surge of adrenaline. Nolan's reflexes sharpened, his senses heightened. He saw the Z-Crawl leader's attack patterns with blinding clarity, and Rhea, fueled by his presence, channeled the relic's energy with unprecedented precision, deflecting the Z-Crawl's blows with ease. The Z-Crawl, however, had anticipated this. A series of emitters activated around the room, bathing the area in a sickly green light. A dampening feel, the relic's energy flickered, weakened. The bioresonance bond frayed, the pain intensifying. Rhea staggered, clutching her head. The relic's power was draining her, overwhelming her senses. She struggled to maintain control, her teal skin paling. Nolan saw her weakening, her movements slowing. He knew what he had to do. He threw himself in front of her, shielding her from the Z-Crawl leader's next attack. A searing pain ripped through his shoulder as the Z-Crawl's claws tore through his makeshift armor. Rhea cried out, her voice infused with anguish. The Z-Crawl leader, sensing victory, seized Rhea, dragging her toward a nearby examination table. "The data will be extracted," he hissed, "and then you, human, will provide the necessary catalyst." Rage, desperation, and a primal need to protect Rhea surged through Nolan. He felt a power he never knew he possessed building within him, a raw, untamed energy linked somehow to the bioresonance bond. He roared, a sound that echoed through the ship, and unleashed it. A wave of pure energy erupted from his body, shattering the dampening field, sending the Z-Crawl leader flying across the room. Rhea gasped, freed from the Z-Crawl's grasp, but Nolan collapsed, weakened and disoriented, the energy surge having taken its toll. Rhea looked at Nolan, then at the Z-Crawl leader struggling to rise. She knew what she had to do. She had to end this now. She focused all her will, all her energy, on the relic. "I'm sorry, Nolan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But I have no other choice." She activated the relic to its fullest extent. A blinding light filled the room. Rhea saw a vision, a swirling vortex of energy, a gateway to somewhere else, a portal, a way to fundamentally change the gamelon's future. But the vision was incomplete, unsettling. Driven by desperation and the fading image, Rhea made a decision. She grabbed Nolan's hand, her grip tight. "Hold on," she said, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and willpower. "We're going home." With a final surge of power, she activated the portal. The room dissolved into a swirling vortex of light, and they were gone. Leaving the Z-Kral ship behind, the destination of the portal unknown, and the fate of Gamilos hanging in the balance. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors. One moment, the cold stone of the Gamelon ruin pressed against Nolan's back. The next, a swirling vortex of emerald, sapphire, and gold enveloped him and Rhea. Then, abrupt stillness. They stood on solid ground. But the ground itself pulsed with a soft internal light. The air hummed with an energy that vibrated in Nolan's teeth. Before them stretched a landscape unlike anything he could have imagined, even after crash landing on Gamilos. Towering structures of pure light spiraled into a violet sky, their forms constantly shifting, reforming, like liquid dreams. Swirls of iridescent energy danced between them, crackling with contained power. Behind them, the portal shimmered, its edges fraying like a worn tapestry. Jagged cracks of crimson energy spiderwebbed across its surface. It pulsed erratically, threatening to wink out of existence. "It's unstable," Rhea breathed, her teal skin shimmering with a faint, anxious bioluminescence. "We don't have much time." The Nexus was more than just a destination. It was a crucible of raw power. The energy fields reacted to their presence, swirling faster, their colors intensifying. Nolan felt a strange pull, a resonance within his chest that mirrored the Nexus's chaotic harmony. Then they appeared. Not creatures of flesh and blood, but beings of pure energy. They coalesced from the swirling light, forming humanoid shapes that flickered and danced like heat haze above a forge. Their forms were vaguely Gamelon, but their eyes burned with an ancient, unknowable intelligence. "Guardians?" Rhea whispered, her voice filled with awe and reverence. "The Relic Guardians." One of the Guardians, its form resolving into a more distinct, feminine shape, spoke. Its voice resonated directly in Nolan's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "You seek the power of the relic. You seek to understand its purpose, but do you understand your own past?" Images flooded Nolan's mind, glimpses of a Gamelon society he hadn't seen before. Towering cities powered by harnessed energy, beings with both male and female characteristics working in harmony, a vibrant, technologically advanced civilization unlike the matriarchal society he now knew. The images were fragmented, incomplete, like pieces of a shattered mirror. The Guardian's voice echoed in Rhea's mind. Nolan could feel her shock and confusion. The males were not always absent, Gamelon. They were integral, protectors, balancers. Nolan felt a strange tingling sensation, a warmth spreading through his limbs. The Nexus's energy seemed to flow around him, through him, without causing harm. He felt stronger, more alert. Rhea stared at him, her amber eyes wide with surprise. "Nolan, you're radiating energy." How? He didn't know. He only knew that the Nexus, which should have been overwhelming, felt familiar, almost welcoming. A guttural roar shattered the ethereal calm. The unstable portal behind them buckled, then exploded inward, showering the Nexus with shards of distorted energy. Through the rent, a squadron of Z-Kral fighters poured into the Nexus, their chitinous hulls gleaming with malevolent intent. But these weren't the same Z-Kral they had fought on Gamilos. The Nexus's energy was warping them, twisting their physiology. Their armor pulsed with chaotic energy, their weapons crackled with unstable power, their eyes burned with a feverish, corrupted light. They're changing," Rhea gasped. Horror etched on her face. "The Nexus, it's affecting them." One of the Guardians turned its attention to the Z-Kral, its form flickering with anger. "Intruders. Desecrators. You shall not defile this sacred place." The Guardian turned back to Rhea and Nolan. Before you can wield the relic's power, you must understand its past. Solve the puzzle, Gamelon. Unravel the truth. Before them, a complex array of light and energy coalesced into a three-dimensional puzzle. Symbols from ancient Gamelon history, intertwined with geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change with every glance, floated in the air. Nolan stepped forward, drawn to the puzzle. He saw patterns, connections, mathematical sequences that resonated with his human understanding of logic and engineering. Rhea, however, seemed frozen, staring at the puzzle with a growing sense of despair. I don't understand. It's wrong. Everything I thought I knew. Doubt clouded her eyes, dimming her usual vibrant energy. The weight of leadership, the responsibility for her people, seemed to crush her. As Nolan reached out to touch the puzzle, a burst of chaotic energy slammed into the nexus. The Zekral, ignoring the Guardian's power, were attacking, their weapons disrupting the ethereal landscape. The energy fields protecting the puzzle flickered and died. The puzzle itself began to fragment, its intricate patterns dissolving into chaos. Nolan threw himself in front of Rhea, shielding her from the blast. He felt a surge of energy, a raw, untamed power erupting from within him. He instinctively reached out, focusing his will, channeling the Nexus's energy into a protective shield. A shimmering barrier of pure light erupted around them, deflecting the Zekral's attacks. He felt a burning sensation, a strain on his mind, but he held firm, his focus unwavering. Nolan, what are you doing? Rhea cried, her voice filled with disbelief. He didn't have time to explain. He could feel the Zekral pressing their attack, their corrupted energy threatening to overwhelm him. He had to focus, to control the power that flowed through him. He glanced back at the puzzle, its fragmented patterns swirling before him. He saw it now, the key, the connection that Rhea had missed. The males, he said, his voice strained but clear. They weren't just protectors, they were sacrifices. They channeled the relic's power, absorbing its instability, preventing it from being misused. They gave their lives to maintain the balance. The puzzle clicked into place, its fragmented pieces coalescing into a unified whole. A wave of energy pulsed outward, illuminating the Nexus with blinding light. The Guardians turned their attention to Rhea, their forms radiating power. The truth is revealed. Now Gamelon, you must choose. You can use the relic's power to permanently alter your biology, eliminating the Zekral threat forever. But in doing so, you will sever your connection to the relic, and potentially your bond with the human. The Guardians paused, their energy forms shifting. Or you can find a way to harmonize with the relic's power without altering your biology. A path fraught with uncertainty and danger, but one that preserves your connection to the past and your choice in the future. Before Rhea could answer, the Zekral leader, his form now grotesquely mutated, his eyes burning with insane ambition, landed before them. His voice, a distorted rasp, echoed through the Nexus. Fools, you cannot comprehend the power that lies within this place. I will claim it for myself. I will use it to conquer the galaxy. Rhea stared at the Guardians, her face etched with turmoil. Her duty to her people warred with her growing love for Nolan, her desire to protect them both. I choose the alternative path, she said, her voice trembling but firm. I will find a way to harmonize with the relic's power, to preserve our connection to the past and our choice in the future. The Guardians nodded, their forms radiating approval. Then you shall be guided. A path lies hidden, a way to harness the relic's power without sacrificing your connection to it. A new pathway of light opened before them, winding through the chaotic energy fields of the Nexus. But the portal behind them was collapsing faster, its edges dissolving into nothingness. The Guardians spoke one last time, their voices urgent. The path leads to the Zekral's weakness, but time is running out. Choose wisely, Gamelon. The fate of your people, and perhaps the galaxy, rests upon your shoulders. The Nexus groaned, a sickening lurch that sent tremors through the already unstable dimension. Cracks spread across the glowing walls, and the air hummed with raw energy. The portal, their only escape route, disappeared completely. Oh dear, Nolan sighed, his grip firm on his energy rifle. They were trapped. Before he could fully assess their situation, the Zekral leader roared, a sound that echoed with unnatural power. A vortex of corrupted energy erupted from his hands, swirling with dark greens and sickly yellows. It was a genetic weapon, designed to twist the relic's power and weaponize Gamelon DNA, threatening to unravel the Nexus and poison Gamilos itself. The air grew thick with a cloying metallic scent. Rhea gasped, her eyes widening, her teal skin shimmering with an intense, almost blinding light. The relic, it responds to harmony, she said, her voice barely a whisper. A song of creation. The Zekral. He's singing a song of destruction. Nolan understood. The relic wasn't just a power source. It was a conduit for emotional energy. I can amplify that, he said, stepping forward. I can focus your intent. He drew on his innate ability to project energy, a skill honed through years of combat and survival, focusing his will, his very being, into a single point. The strain was immediate, his muscles screaming in protest, but he held firm. Rhea closed her eyes, reaching out with her empathic senses, feeling the chaotic energy of the Nexus, the pain of the corrupted relic, and the desperate longing of the Zekral leader. She began to hum, a low, resonant tone that vibrated in the air, a counterpoint to the Zekral's destructive song. Nolan channeled his energy, acting as a conduit, amplifying her intent, focusing her emotional harmony into a concentrated beam. The two energies collided, a blinding flash of light followed by a shockwave that rocked the Nexus. The Zekral's genetic weapon faltered, the swirling vortex disrupted, its power diminished. But the Nexus energy intensified, becoming even more volatile. The Zekral leader screamed in frustration, his body contorting, his bones cracking and reforming. He was forcing a full merger with the Nexus energy, becoming a monstrous, unstable being of pure power, a grotesque parody of life. His limbs elongated, his skin turned a sickly green, and his eyes glowed with malevolent energy. Rhea cried out, stumbling backward. Visions flooded her mind, images of past Gamelon males, their faces etched with peace and acceptance, sacrificing themselves to protect the relic, containing the chaos. Their role wasn't one of dominance, but of selfless service. Nolan saw the understanding dawn in Rhea's eyes, and he knew what he had to do. He stepped forward, placing himself between Rhea and the monstrous Zekral leader. Get ready to open a portal, he said, his voice calm and resolute. I'll contain him. No, Rhea cried, grabbing his arm. There's another way. She closed her eyes again, reaching deep within herself, drawing on the relic's power, not to destroy the Zekral leader, but to sever his connection to the Nexus, to strip him of his power, to return him to his original form. A wave of pure, white energy washed over the Zekral leader, disrupting his forced merger, severing his connection to the nexus. His monstrous form dissolved, his body shrinking, his bones reforming. He collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, no longer a monster, but a broken, defeated warrior. As the Z-Crow leader lay helpless, Rhea approached him, her hand outstretched. Hesitantly, she touched his face, sharing a moment of empathy, a glimpse into his desperate desire for connection, a desire twisted and corrupted by his culture of conquest. She saw his loneliness, his pain, his yearning for something more. With the Z-Crawl leader defeated, the Nexus began to stabilize. The chaotic energy subsided, the cracks in the walls sealed, and the air cleared. The relic guardians, their forms shimmering with ethereal light, appeared before them, acknowledging Rhea's wisdom and Nolan's courage. Balance was restored. Later, standing before her people, Rhea addressed them, her voice amplified by the relic, her words echoing across the land. "We have a choice," she said, her eyes scanning the faces of her people. "We can remain isolated, clinging to our traditions, or we can embrace a new path, one of integration and understanding. We can learn from Nolan, from his human perspective, and we can share our knowledge and our culture with him. The choice is yours." The elder matriarch, her face etched with years of wisdom and experience, stepped forward. "I have witnessed the power of Nolan and Rhea's bond," she said, her voice resonating with newfound conviction. "I have seen the wisdom of Rhea's choice. I step down, and I support her vision of integration. The future of Gamilos lies in unity, not isolation." Nolan and Rhea stood together, hand in hand, their bond a symbol of unity and hope for the future of Gamilos, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The trials they faced, the battles they fought, the love they shared, had changed them and their world forever. As the sun rose over Gamilos, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange, pink, and gold, Rhea turned to Nolan, her eyes filled with love and gratitude. She reached up and gently touched his face. "Thank you," she whispered, "for showing us that love knows no boundaries." Nolan smiled, pulling her close, their bodies pressed together, their hearts beating as one. He knew that their journey was just getting started, but he also knew that they could face anything, as long as they had each other. Their love was a testament to the power of connection, a beacon of hope in a vast and often unforgiving universe. Their embrace was a promise, a beginning, a new dawn. Love knew no boundaries, not of species, culture, or dimension.